How do you do, Heidi? Hello, Luke.
Hello, sir.
I'm happy to be with you. All I know for sure is that whenever I go out for a job, I feel like George Plimpton. I feel totally unprepared. Every project that I do is absolutely exploratory and as abstract as it can be within the confines of music.
Perfect.
So that's what I do for a living.
Excellent.
That makes perfect sense.
I know something else.
Yes.
I know that it was just discovered by archaeologists that that Luke may have been a woman because of the use of feminine verbs, feminine lingo in this thing we call Luke in the Bible. Now, they went farther. They said that she might be Jesus's mother. Now, I'm not going to be bothering Jesus with any of this conjecture.
He's got his hands full.
Because your name, I was the fourth boy. They ran out of biblical names by the time they got to me. But it's a blessing. And I want to tell you what I think is wonderful.
Okay. Yes.
Luke is warning everybody, mankind, about its hubris, that it has really met an unamused God. And God brings his fury down on these people for fucking up bad with their pride. And that's what he addresses. And Luke says, he or she says, he hath scattered the proud in the imagination of their hearts, and the rich he hath sent empty away. I believe that's Luke 22. The fact is, when the pandemic came and I was thrown into quarantine, that was March 15th of 2020. I decided that perhaps it was a biblical proportion and that it would be a somehow humanize us all and give us a capacity for lateral relationships, horizontal affairs. And so I'm very happy to be with you folks on your podcast.
Yeah, as well.
Thank you.
It was a tough year. I did a recording project while I sat it out with an artist from the Yucatan. Never met her, but managed long distance love. I managed to get a consortium of string players together. I arrange music here, as you can see. I have entry level equipment here. I do a lot of stuff at home. And isolation is not something new to me, nor is like you folks. I'm sure a lot of what you do is almost monastic. You're just, so there's not a lot that was new about the isolation, except that it is mandatory.
Right. It's not, you don't get to pick when you do it.
Do I have to have on a mask with you guys, or can we just assume that this is safe?
We're both vaccinated.
Yes, we are.
we're doubly set. Yes.
Hey, I had my 2 shots, so I just want you to know.
Hey,
outstanding. So
we're all
three
good.
of us.
Yeah, welcome to the club.
No cooties.
Yes.
Perfect. I'm
So
so
you
sick of cooties.
You never met your collaborator on this new record?
No.
How did the two of you connect?
Comme ci, comme ça, like this.
Mm-hmm.
Would have FaceTime. She would send me the harp and the voice, and I would arrange. I'd use a septet. I use 7 strings, 7 different string lines, the way Kurt Weill did. I love that. 3 violin lines, 2 violas, 1 cello, 1 bass for any musical dweebs out there. It's, to me, this is the world I want to inhabit. I don't play a violin. I had a semester of cello and it was too painful. I had to abandon it. So I'm a big disappointment without a fret. But I use strings and it's my world, and this is what I've been doing for, I'm now 78, and I've been doing, this has been my kind of my métier, my bag groove flip, my thing, the thing that, that fascinates me. I mean, beyond anything. It's the mathematics beyond. It is just amazing to me how gratifying musical arranging can be. But it's about as profitable monetarily as doing the crossword puzzle with
Much like podcasting.
when my wife heard this last project I started on, she said, I get it. We're not going to make a dime on this one either. In fact, I'm going to put that on her headstone, and I certainly hope I learn the passwords before she goes. But here's the thing. Hey, kidding. I'm sorry. All men are beasts. All men are beasts. 101.
Oh, please. Women are just as bad. Don't even. We are just as terrible.
Well, I keep my dukes up, but I think, but I did do that Women Will Rule the World, that Calypso song with Ry Cooder. That was fun. I enjoyed that. And I do like the absence of the kidney punch in the locker rooms. Howdy, I'm big on this and Bubba that. I think that women can bring a civilizing grace to these incredibly vile political matters.
I do too, and I certainly hope that we can prove that sooner than later.
No, it's quite urgent. You wonder, what is the connection here? What is the underpinning value system that drives my interest in music? It makes me hard to brand, although I would say I've done some signature work inadvertently. It is that I think I agree with, I want to get one more name drop in here before I quit this thing. This campaign for the variety of life and its expression and how we must preserve that. It's not just the monarch butterfly. It's poets that don't speak our language. Lawrence Ferlinghetti was right when he wrote that great poem, Pity the Nation. And pity the poor nation who knows only its own language, whose breath is money and sleeps the sleep of the too well fed. Pity that nation. So what I do, and I've been doing it all my life, is trying to find out what seems vestigial, what isn't anybody else interested in, what is supremely unimportant, what are we missing here? When I got, at the beginning of the pandemic, I got out of nowhere a letter, Mr. Parks, will you get me a record deal? I said, this young lady from Veracruz, I told her, can't do that. I'm nobody. I'm 98 or 70. I'm 70. Pardon. Don't rush.
Round down. Yeah.
Hold on. I'm 78 years old. What do I told her, I can't do that. I don't know anybody. They've all left with their golden parachutes. It was rape and run, hit and miss, and they're gone. Nobody's going to return my call. Get Dyke Parks, the codger rocker of the 60s, the cult hero of the 60s, doing a poetry project from the Yucatan. Record executives would run from such a proposition. So my wife had every right to think that we wouldn't make a dime. But I'll tell you something. I got the cost recovery. I found a record label called Modern Music in Berlin, BMG, headed by a man who once headed both the classical and jazz divisions of publishing houses. Cognoscenti, real big deal, man. I mean, a nice guy who, like I would hope from a record label executive, eats anything, can genre hop without braggadocious, monopolism. It's beyond none such. Who's out there? Somebody came and said, what are you doing? Bang. So we're coming out with a record shortly. It's in June. It's called Only in America. Isn't that a great title?
Perfect.
It's perfect. And it kind of completely fits, we've been talking for 15 minutes and it's everything you're saying, I feel like comes across in your music. You can hear, I know from the beginning, there's always been a lot of ecology in the songs and the things you choose to work with lyrically.
The steel band doing Aquarium by Saint-Saëns.
And the following thing was, finding these other genres of music, cultures of music, and championing them in a way that they're not getting in this country. and adding your particular skills to all of this.
But this is all, I'd like to say I choose the route I take,
Mm-hmm.
but I haven't done that ever. When I was working, well, listen, when I was working for the Trinidad Steel Band,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to tell you, it was quite an adventure for a record producer such as myself to get, I want to take this so that you see something.
Yes, please.
I'm in a small room here, and let me see if I can get I'm in a small room in the most expensive real estate in an urban center in the country, Los Angeles. Terrible place to rent a house. Terrible. So there on my wall, I don't know. Yes.
Yeah.
We see them, yes.
There are my friends. These are my friends. I keep a bus on the wall to remind me that I was there with these men. There's a little old George down there with in front of a graveyard, a Parks person. Last time I saw him was when he was hugging a Parks tombstone. So I'm thinking that he would outlast me. He didn't. But I just wanted to say, I had no special drive. It wasn't like I was going to make a record about calypso music, but it was thrust upon me. I produced these men. There were 28 of them. I was making a secretarial salary, and it was time to come out with a record. Now, that wasn't me. It was them. It was, once again, it's not about me. I mean, it's not about me. It's about, where I am is positioning me. I feel very much like George Plimpton in this. I'm surrounding myself with superior talents in a specific field,
Mm-hmm.
and osmoting as much as I can from, and giving my all in mutual empowerment. With the steel band in '71, with the steel band, it was going through the South of the United States, going in a bus with 28 black men in the South and breaking down on a country road with the sound of a shotgun in the hill above. I mean, I got to find out what the United States was all about because I couldn't help it. But back in '71, when I was just a minor official at a record company, Black Lives Mattered.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me places. I got to meet two men who were knighted, black men who were knighted, Oxfordians, knighted by Queen Elizabeth, who became our friends, allies, help us. But you see, it's always been external, usually an economic issue or something. When the girl called from Mexico to give me something to do during the pandemic, guess what? I don't speak Spanish. But I knew when I heard the songs that I agreed with her. Does that sensation ever occur to you?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
This is my favorite popular musician, by the way, pop musician, is for his ability, pianistic, poetic, melodic, arranging, the whole bit, is Paolo Conte, Paolo Conte, Conte. And the reason I like this man in his Reveries album is they printed the lyrics and absolutely make Bob Dylan look Dullsville. They really do. And terribly transportive and free relating and articulate and shiny in the darkness and wonderful sense of transportation. But once again, like with him and Marisa, I love that, Cesaria Avoria, many Italian singers, Volare, I knew somehow or another that the guy was saying, let's ascend. And so I talk too much, say too little, but just to button this, what I represent now is a man in the throes of purgatory, waiting for a small release, a modest release to come out, hoping that it will catapult that woman, soloistic as she is, onto a stage with 7 string players around and put me in a cameo position as a pianist, so I have a job,
Mm-hmm.
I
Key.
want to go. I want, for example, I don't care about the concert, but after the concert, I want to be taken to the finest finger food in Barcelona that comes from the Mediterranean. I'd like my wife and me, and I tell you, when I go on the plane to perform this album, if I get a guest appearance, a cameo in Madrid or Barcelona, or maybe somewhere where people, American people, want to cross the aisle in the browning of America, and that's where we are, smack dab in the grips of multiculturalism and the chinless wonder, Mitch McConnell and the surly Republicans doing nothing to facilitate a confectionary atmosphere, a celebratory atmosphere of multicultural adjustment, and it's going to take work.
See,
I find the beast within. I've always found myself terribly superior to any papist dog. You know, it is, pick on the Roman Catholics, or do like Randy Newman does, talk about rednecks. The last place you can actually, who is that? That doesn't matter. That's just a relative, and I've read the will.
All right.
No, they're nothing to do with it. No, I'm serious. It's too bad, man. That was primogenitor in my oldest brother's oldest son. My oldest brother, who wrote something stupid, and I keep saying, no, he didn't. He wrote something smart.
Right.
I wrote the stupid stuff.
there's something, I mean, clearly, if nothing else, just sort of putting it out there in the ether, your advocacy and your position as an ally to some of these genres and sounds that perhaps, like you were saying, a major record label might not be interested in, but you being who you are and what you accomplish and what you have accomplished, maybe somebody picks up the phone and goes, well, okay, we'll take a shot on this because you're giving it your seal of approval. I'm just,
yeah.
And the thing that I find so fascinating, and it's so interesting to hear you go over all this history, because something about your arranging has a very American sound to it, and I can't put my finger on it. I was listening to the record going, is this sort of a Copeland thing I'm hearing? I can't exactly figure it out what it is or how it is you're doing it, which makes it all the more like just a fantastic magic trick. Can you explain, if at all possible, what you see your role as an arranger doing to a song? What's in service to a song, how you attack it? And maybe the attack's the wrong word to use.
Yeah, no, I think that's, first of all, if I get a song, for example, I'm working on a song right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's by Inara George. She's the daughter of my friend Lowell. I was there the day she was born, where she was born, in Maryland. That was where Lowell and I went to the cemetery, the Park Cemetery. Maryland is lousy with parks, as that's where they landed. Protestants landed in a Catholic place, crazy people. And soon fled to Pennsylvania in their wagons. But I'm now with Lowell's daughter. She's probably in her 40s. She's certainly in her 40s. She's just as sweet as she could be, and strong, tensile strength, great, articulate. And she, a couple of weeks ago, she saw a hawk, a red-tailed hawk, on a limb in her yard, and there was the predator holding its prey in front of her, and she was astonished by it. And then there were some beautiful trees, and maybe a tower with its sagging wires. So you get more Rouchet than this is not Audubon. This is more Rouchet than Audubon. And you get the reality of and with the hedge species and so forth. And there's critters up there in the Hollywood Hills, and here comes one. And then she wrote a song about it. Just amazing to me that this medium, this is I've got a Steinway in the other room. It came into our family on March 11th, 1911, the day my father was born. Pianos in those days were called matrimony gifts, and they were part of a civilizing process of the middle class. Steinway, it was like a diamond is forever. It was a campaign to sell piano to people. My family was very musical. Uh, uh, Bands on July 4th in the gazebo at the park on July 4th, and over 40 musicians whose name was Parks were in that picture that I have in the garage in a cardboard box. So I was interested in preserving these acoustic forms. You'll notice back in the 60s, we really started to get fascinated with the trap set. It became an integral part of music. It drives music. I decided that I wanted to find out if string sections were capable of any butchery, some rhythms that were just persuasive and got people to feel like they wanted to dance. Absolutely, it's done all the time. Mendelssohn knew how to do it. Many people do. And so I put my effort, Randy Newman told me what to do. It's like my good friend Ringo Starr says, don't you hate it when people drop names? My good friend Randy Newman, I haven't seen him in a decade, but he said, you divide them? Nobody does string division. Nobody does it. It's almost like a decoration. To me, the strings are the bulwark of performable music. It's what will keep performance alive, like that. I mean, there's some. There it is, somewhere in there. That came from Spain. But we wouldn't know it if Gottschalk hadn't written it down. And he wrote it down when he was court pianist. The man from New Orleans went to Spain, became a court pianist for Queen Isabella. They had a little lovey-dovey. I understand something happened there. He was asked to leave. But in the meantime, he taught the royal family how to play the piano. I'll bet you he did. And he recorded the music of Spain. Like, same thing with like Percy Grainger. If he had not written down that theme from County Derry, London Derry Air, if he hadn't written that down, it would not have been such a popular song. Made him a multimillionaire when the Doughboys came back with their cigarettes, their R.J. Reynolds cigarettes. The Camels are coming, and that they brought their tobacco, and they brought this song, and the piano sheet music was called Danny Boy. Percy Grainger made a mint. He didn't have to work again. He did a lot of great things in his orchestrations. A magnificent piano composer. So naturally, I'm looking at Ravel, I'm looking at a Smetana, a Dvorak, all these people that are roots music. Roots music. Taking a popular piece and elevating it. So this is it, from the street to the elite. This is what Beethoven did. Has a hymnic quality, but the thing is, like We Shall Overcome or the Hatikva or the Marseillaise, has a hymnic quality and became the role model for his Ninth Symphony, this piece here. Mm-hmm. All folk music. So this is what I decided. I'm not a great composer. It's too bad. What I am is a miniaturist. I know that. And I have been able to find a living and a purpose. And what Phil says, in such ugly times, the only true protest is beauty. I have found a way to help make the world, I think, more beautiful. And I do that taking songs that nobody would notice and putting a proscenium around them, which is the support of musicians. So one thing to do in arranging a song is to support the singer and the song, and both must survive. Oh boy. And not dwarf or engulf the singer. I have, obviously, and I look at the work as I look back on it, I can certainly be accused of youthful excess, and I can still be considered accused of being excessive. But the fact is, I love arranging because I love how it illustrates. It has an illustrative, and even if you feel it has cosmetic is not a bad word to me. Cosmetic is to make the world more beautiful. That's what doing what Philip said was observed was the right thing to do. Let's do that. So here it comes. Some of my best arrangements have been for small events. Peter Case doing Small Town Spree, one of my favorite. Brutal song with a guitar, just wonderful, stark. How about Sam Phillips doing Wasting My Time with, they could only afford one cello, I was told, but we put them on 3 times different lines. And she took off her guitar, it was so convincing. That is really remarkable. When you realize that you think you've got it all figured out, and in fact, the bowing arm brings an entirely new dimension to everything. It brings validation, a sense, it's not just that it sounds more expensive. Maybe it sounds like, maybe it is the sharper image. And that's what I go for. And I use cliche and what I would like to call the art of cliche at every turn that I can. Why? Because of this flip book mentality, the magazine, the American public has no time for an exposition. They don't have time for a record album. They want the big bang. They want it now. On demand. That's why we've got the pandemic continuing. People just won't settle down. They have to be mollycoddled into thinking that they need it now. America's so on demand. It's so revolting, and it should stop. And I should think it's one of the surrenders to coming into and joining the world, the rest of the world. And I think America should be the first to join the rest of the world. That's how I think America should be first. With a brother, a dead brother who gave his life to be the youngest member of the history of the State Department or Foreign Service. That was my brother who went to the University of Pennsylvania. I wouldn't have talked about that if I had met somebody from near Philadelphia. So I can do no better than look for that justice. Can I tell you one other interesting story about my family?
Please.
All right, I'm gonna give you one that was my second eldest brother. He was a retired Methodist minister. Did a pretty good job with his divinity degree, considering that he was epileptic. He suffered greatly, but he was no whiner. He did a great job of great service to others. Recently, I'd say within the last couple of years, it's a blur. He wrote to me, he said, "Do you remember, we were in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Do you remember that time with Mr. Wells?" I said, "Yes, I do. I remember that event." Well, it turns out Mr. Wells, one time we were all in the kitchen with a Formica and a linoleum. It was where you were in the pre-air conditioned South. We were in the kitchen. It was the place where we lived. The family, the 4 boys were there, sitting there. My mother's probably peeling beans or something, whatever they do to make meals. Of course, now I know all too well my wife thinks that cook is a noun. So there I am. But in fact, it was a good time for all of us. I must have been about 4. My oldest brother might not just have been entering his teens, but pretty good spread. Mr. Wells came in, he was reeling. He had a glass that made noise. It had ice. That was expensive. It had a drink in it. I could tell. It smelled. Mr. Wells was reeling, and he said, and the screen door closed behind me. He said, "Mary Joy," he said to my mother. My father was off at a war. "Mary Joy." It wasn't off at a war, it was off at an army camp. We just burned a cross on Mrs. Goldstein's lawn. My mother was at the sink. She turned around and she said, "Get out of this house and never return." My mother didn't wait a moment to think about it, the cost or the effect. She did what was right. Now, I said, "Of course, Dick, I'll always remember that." And Dick wrote me back and he said, and it was not lost on our mother that Mr. Wells was the president of the bank and held the mortgage on our house. So listen, guys, I met Adlai Stevenson when I was a kid in a men's room in Philadelphia. It was a campaign stop. I was called the Columbus Boy Choir School. We went over from Princeton to Philly to be the opening act for Adlai Stevenson, who was running for the presidency.
Mm-hmm.
I got his autograph. If anybody wants to know how things measure politically these days, just look up Adlai Stevenson quotes. You'll see that people could handle a 2-syllable word, and it was the sharper definition. So you come away from such fecund, tremendously demonstrative, powerful images of people who did the right thing. My father, and I take no credit for it, who was the chief psychiatric examining officer at the liberation of Dachau. My dad did that, and my dad came back and he went to Florida and he integrated the first Southern hospital voluntarily, and there were no incidents, not one. They found some razor blades somebody put in the tongue depressors, but they got them. No problems. My dad humanized the joint. He took the numbers off the houses and put words on them that the patients could rely on. My dad thought that man's problems were not so much with himself as with society, that society does terrible things to people and they suffer. So I come from what I would say is incredibly tall timber, and in terms of social recognizance, what you do for society, I have no real abilities, but this incredible desire to serve in the arts. And now that I look at it carefully, and I'm watching us like a hawk, I see that politics is telling the arts what to do. The tail is wagging the dog. It is time for the arts to tell politics what to do. And I'm telling you, I don't look at music as a decorative device.
That's not.
And when I talk about cosmetic, to do something cosmetic, maybe somebody needs something. I think that the best medium for arranging, for me, has turned out to be a string section. It doesn't impose anything. Matter of fact, you get such great transparency in such an event. It can actually be absolutely transparent. And Randy's uncle Al, who conducted his first the orchestra on Randy's first record, we drove him home after he did the session. I was in the back seat, Randy drove, and Uncle Al, the man who wrote he wrote that. Uncle Al wrote the 20th Century Fox. Anyway, that he wrote that, I think, when he was 36. And he said, which something that wasn't lost on me, he said, 98 players can be the softest sound in the world. And I believe that. I mean, it can be absolutely, man. I tweet every day. I tweet, therefore I am.
Yes.
And I do that. And I tell you, I really would love it if your podcast would encourage people to buy records. Very few people are buying them. And it is the only way we'll recover our costs. And so I just admit that vulgarity. I'm 78. It's ridiculous, it seems to me, for the arts to be begging, or for me to be begging.
Agreed.
And I'm not going to beg. because I'll be fine even if I don't have finger food in Barcelona.
You're going to have finger food in Barcelona.
I'll get on, but I would like to see that I'm part of that process called the browning of America. In a way, it happens. For example, there's a group called Los Lobos.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
They've just put out a version of Sail On Sailor, which I wrote with Brian Wilson.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And a few other people stepped up later. But so yeah. So this is what we're doing. I'm doing this. And so the song, listen, just to let you know about
Yes.
how productive this is, how productive this all is. Inara, I said, what do you want? What she said, will you write a song with me? It's about let's do it together. Something together. So about the red-tailed hawk. I said, what is this about? She said, well, I have a friend by the name of Randy Poster. He's a music. He's a big mocker, big rabbi. He hired his influence. He called music supervisor. His influence is they hire composers. Okay, music supervisors
Hmm.
are. So Randy wants to do a record, a series of songs. I don't think a record. I don't think they use that word anymore. Of songs about birds, new songs about birds. So for the Audubon Society to profit somehow for land acquisition, right? To get the development rights, new what do you call that? And where the environment where they can survive. Habitat. Habitat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, so habitat's a word. So I should know that from my beloved Jimmy Carter. But the thing is, lovely. Turns out I have a friend, Gary George, no relation to Lowell. He was in publicity at Warner's. He was married to Bonnie Raitt, and then one day he decided that he was coming out, and he's out now. But he's also the head of the Audubon chapter in the in Los Angeles, and he's just delighted we're doing this for their organization. My friend Gary has seen all but 8 of the world's known birds,
Wow.
and this guy, this jerk from Warner Brothers Records, I used to know, he's in publicity. This jerk, he also speaks and reads fluently Japanese.
Oh my gosh.
No, he's totally outdweebed me. I'm just lost. But so, yeah, it's about birds. So it turns out that, yes, somehow or another, I find a way to try to think more than about my own ascent, although I am interested in somehow hoping that I will still create my definitive work, that it is ahead of me. 2 years ago, I did Coney Island of the Mind, Lawrence Ferlinghetti. I did 30 minutes of it with the Kronos Quartet at the San Francisco Jazz Festival. Once again, it's not something that really appeals to the public, but I think, and poetry from a codger rocker, I thought this was something very important, considering the nature of this great poet laureate. My favorite. Unlike Ginsberg, who never really appealed to me, his Hessian harshness, a little cold for me. I couldn't get past Ginsberg. But Ferlinghetti, he's pissed off, but he's an Italian American, so we're all gonna
It's
have a good
pretty
time.
pissed off. Exactly.
Wonderful though that he's so compassionate and warm. Got this Italian thing that keeps it from being too, abrasive. So here's to your podcast.